Hello, everyone, and welcome to TheraHive's Setting Intentions with DBT Skills, a free webinar that we are hosting. We are going to welcome two of our co-founders to speak on this incredible topic today, but not from a January new you, new me, kind of perspective. Instead, we are going to be approaching this topic grounded in the science and evidence-backed basis of DBT skills. So, I'd love to take a moment to actually introduce our two speakers. We will have our co founder, Dr. Alicia Smart, who is a clinical psychologist and DBT Linehan Board of Certification certified clinician. She's also the owner and clinical director of Guidepost DBT, which is one of the leading DBT centers in California, and of course, our co founder and chief clinical officer here at TheraHive. We will also have Dr. Jesse Finkelstein, who is another co-founder here at TheraHive. He is our chief product officer, also clinical psychologist, and also DBT Linehan Board of Certification certified clinician. He also just released his book, DBT Skills for Real Life, which is an incredible book. Highly suggest you check it out and order a copy for yourselves on Amazon, and the creator of the Game of Real Life, a incredible DBT resource for clinicians and for folks at home to kind of incorporate DBT skills into their real lives. In a moment, I will turn it over to both of them to get us started. I just wanted to quickly set the agenda for where this presentation is going. We are really going to be diving into why resolutions fail, getting behind the science of where people find themselves stuck in kind of this constant cycle of never achieving those resolutions, why that happens. And then, of course, introducing this middle path, this idea that there is an alternative, there is something that does work that is going to be about defining intentions. We're going to use a mountain metaphor throughout this presentation to distinguish between values and goals and everything along the way as you set yourself up for this wonderful hike that is life. We're going to talk about walking the path, how we use specific DBT skills to stay aligned with our intentions, and we'll be closing out this live presentation with some interactive Q&A. Just as a reminder, the recording link will be shared with all participants post-session. So without further ado, let's dive into it. Why resolutions fail, the science here. Jesse's going to dive into more details with an exact example, but I just wanted to give a really quick overview, which is, we see that in January, this predictable pattern comes up. There's pressure to change. There's these big resolutions that lead to early confidence, this excitement that triggers in our brain. Yes, today or this year is going to be the year that I get my life together and everything falls into place and it's going to be amazing. And then this cycle of shame when things actually get hard, when we don't have the skills or tools to actually institute that change. Let me turn it over to Jesse to dive right in.
Hey there. Thank you for tuning in to our free webinar recording of Setting Intention with DBT Skills. In this webinar, we covered the basics you need to know to start setting intentions that align with your goals and values. If you're loving this content and you want to go deeper, we built an entire mini course with in-depth instructional videos, worksheets, case studies, and more. We encourage you to check it out by visiting our website and enrolling today. Plus, you can apply the cost of the mini course toward the tuition of any of our skills group programs if you enroll. All right, back to our regularly scheduled program.
So getting my life together doesn't come with immediate enjoyment. Most of what it involves is effort, discomfort, and repetition without much emotional payoff at the beginning. And when there's no payoff, people often stop. I mean, I don't know about you all, but think about when you first start working out. You don't necessarily immediately see the benefits of it. And if we were just looking for that quick emotional hit, well, then many of us would give up. Now, one thing I want to note is how striking and how predictable this pattern is. At the start of the year, which we're still currently in, about 52% of people are confident that they'll succeed in their resolutions. And the science tells us by February, so we've got just a couple more days, nearly 88% of people have already quit. Researcher Richard Wiseman calls this an optimism bias. We overestimate how easy change will feel, and underestimate how hard it will be. And that gap between expectation and reality doesn't just derail behavior, it turns normal difficulty into shame. So let's talk about what's sort of striking about this pattern. So this matters because if we don't understand this loop, we keep on blaming ourselves. Um, Chantal, would you mind? There we go. Perfect. So at this point, it's important to say this clearly. This isn't a willpower problem, and it's not a motivation problem. It's a learning and emotion regulation problem. This wouldn't be a talk around DBT if we weren't talking about emotion regulation. So let me keep with my example. When I decide this year I'm going to get my life together, something happens immediately in my brain. There's a sense of relief, a sense of control. I can even picture a version of myself who's got their life together, a me that is calmer, more organized, more on top of things. And that mental picture actually feels good in the moment. It reduces discomfort in this present. And a key point is that it does that before I've even changed any behavior. So, in effect, I've already gotten part of the emotional reward just by deciding. My brain has simulated the payoff. And then real change begins. And as I mentioned earlier, real change is slow, repetitive, and uncomfortable. There are messy days. There are days I procrastinate. There are days I avoid doing things. And as soon as that friction shows up, the emotional payoff disappears. And here's the critical shift, something I want everyone to keep in mind. Instead of interpreting that friction as this is what change feels like, it gets interpreted as I'm failing at this. Once that interpretation sets in, self-judgment kicks in. Our threat response kicks in. Emotion mind kicks in. And at that point, quitting becomes reinforcing. Not because the goal didn't matter, but because stopping immediately reduces shame and pressure, right? If all of a sudden I'm feeling a lot of shame because I did not meet this expectation, then avoiding, quitting offers me relief. So our systems, our brains learn something very specific. When discomfort appears, abandon the change. That's why people end up making the same resolutions year after year. The resolution works emotionally in the moment. I can get excited about this new me. It gives me some hope, some excitement, but it doesn't train behavior over time. So if that's actually what's happening for you, as it is for me, the question isn't how we need to try harder. It's what kind of change model doesn't collapse when discomfort shows up. If I go back again, once again to my goal, getting my life together, the problem was that I didn't care. It was that the original goal relied on pressure and self-judgment to move me. And that kind of pressure can work briefly. I can scare myself into a productive day or a disciplined week, but it doesn't last. I imagine there are many folks who are listening right now who are like, I use self-judgment or punishment to drive behavior. And while I personally get that, what we know from the literature, what we know from the evidence is that actually sustaining behavior over time isn't done through force. It's how the brain learns whether effort is worth continuing. When change is driven by shame or self-criticism, it runs on threat. Our attention narrows, we have increased cognitive load, and everything feels heavier. And over time, our nervous system starts to associate change itself with danger rather than purpose. I really think this bears repeating because goes beyond sort of New Year's resolutions. When we begin to associate change with danger rather than purpose, our nervous system gets overwhelmed. And in DBT terms, that's why change driven by self-judgment is unstable. It might produce short bursts of effort, but it doesn't build skills, confidence, or a life actually worth living. So if change reliably falls apart when it gets hard, the issue isn't like our effort or our character, it's the model we're using. Change is more likely to stick when the behavior feels chosen, meaningful, and aligned with values, not when it's framed as fixing something defective about who I am. And that's the pivot point. And that's crucially what we're going to be talking a lot about today. How we need to move towards values, intentions, and skills, a way of approaching change that expects difficulty instead of collapsing when it shows up. Oh, Alicia, you're on mute.
Thank you, Jesse. I appreciate that. So after we're seeing kind of how resolutions fail, which Jesse did a wonderful job explaining, I want to talk about how intentions offer a middle path. So for those of you familiar with DBT, middle path is dialectics in action, right? It's getting away from that black and white all or nothing and moving toward a synthesis between the two, right? The dialectics in general. So intention, we want to focus on how to respond in real moment, right? Not kind of focusing on the rigid, did I pass or fail? This quote, I really like this quote from Thich Nhat Hanh, which many of you may be familiar with. He's a Zen master, a peace activist, and author. Our intentions create our reality. So, like we just saw, shame and external pressure and guilt doesn't really work long term. So, what does, right? If we want to use this as a strategy, oh, can you go back, Chantal? Thank you. If we want to take this to heart, right, this quote here, that our reality is shaped by our behavioral stance, by our intention, by how we are choosing to show up in the moment, no matter the weather of what's going on. Okay, now we can go for it. So I want you to think about this a little bit like meditation in a way, because when we're meditating, we often might be focusing on our breath or maybe a word, right? And we notice our mind wander and then we bring it back. So like a mindfulness meditation, we focus our attention on our intention, right? We kind of notice when we drift and then we continuously bring it back. So it's a chosen way of responding that keeps you oriented toward your values, especially when things get hard. And that's a key part of the definition, because when things get hard, that is oftentimes when we drift, right? So we're not expecting things to go perfectly, right? It's how do we want to act on purpose in this moment, right? And so even the origin of this word has this kind of built into it in a way, right? The origin of the word is Latin intendere, which literally means to stretch or direct toward, right? And so I want you to think about this stretching toward our goals, our values. So it can also be helpful to kind of orient a little bit of like what intentions are not and what they are, right? So intentions are not outcomes. A goal might be, I want to lose 10 pounds. Yet the intention is, how do I want to treat my body, right? How do I want to eat today? What do I want to do for movement? How am I going to take care of my body, right? That is the intention. We don't fail at an intention. This isn't something you finish or check off the list, right? It's something you inhabit, right? And it's also not really motivation. We're not waiting around until I feel like eating healthy, right? We're going to inhabit, okay, this is part of my values of living a healthy lifestyle. And so I'm going to choose to eat in a wise mind way, right? So it's also not a promise to some future self. You know what? I'll start eating healthy tomorrow or next week, right? So it's choosing, how am I showing up today? That's what intentions are. How do I want to choose to show up today? It's a behavioral stance. It's also a commitment to that direction, right? If my value is health, then it's commitment to that journey.
Okay, so I want to put this all together using what I find to be a helpful metaphor. Um, Imagine you are on a hike, a journey up some enormous mountain. Values are the direction you're moving. They're your east, north, west, south. They are the direction. They're like your compass. Intentions come from within you. Intentions are the decisions on about how you decide to walk up that path. Now, goals are your signposts along the way. They help you navigate, but they're not the mountain itself. And then lastly, the skills. The skills are the tools that help you on your path. So let's deep dive. Chantal, you mind turning to the next slide? Thank you. So let's focus on values for a moment, because this is where the direction actually comes from. Values tell you like which way you're walking. They don't tell you how fast to go, and they don't promise that the path will be easy. They simply orient you towards what matters. And importantly, they still work when the path changes. So, as you're climbing, things are going to happen. Sometimes a massive boulder will appear in the middle of your trail. Sometimes the path washes out. Sometimes a sinkhole opens up. I don't know. I mean, it could happen. And you realize that the route you were on just isn't passable anymore. I'll relate this to my own experience. As a therapist, there are values that I hold of service, right? And maybe for health reasons or what have you, boulders will appear on that path of being of service. And so the question is not, did I fail if a boulder appears, if something gets in the way? The question becomes, where am I headed? If a boulder shows up, how can I keep on walking towards this path of service, towards this direction of being of help to others? Now, the thing about values, if you wouldn't mind, just thank you. If you have to turn back or take a longer route, values remind you that changing path isn't abandoning the climb. It's adjusting the route while keeping the same direction. So I just want to clarify, in DBT terms, values are ongoing, they're chosen, and they're directional. They're not something you accomplish, as Alicia pointed out. They're something that keep you oriented. That's why you never complete a value. I'm never going to complete service, right? You don't finish if your value is connection. You don't check off integrity. You don't suddenly arrive at growth and stay there. You practice these directions again and again across different contexts and situations. Again, I really want to highlight this. This matters because when things get hard, which as humans, they inevitably will, when you're tired, overwhelmed, or discouraged, values help you answer a very basic question. How do I want to show up? Which way am I trying to go? That's different than goals and intentions. Values don't tell you what step to take today, and they don't tell you how to respond in the hard moment. They give you your North Star. So just quickly, examples of values might be things like connection, integrity, growth, service, courage. And those values can show up in lots of different behaviors over the time, but the direction stays the same. Next slide, please. Now, goals. So once we know which direction we're headed, the next question becomes, well, how do I know I'm on a workable path? How do I know I'm on the path at all? That's where goals come in. Goals are not the final destination. They're signposts along the way. So in this metaphor, goals help you check your map. They give you feedback about whether the route you're on is moving you in the direction you care about. Something I want to highlight, though, they're not a measure of your worth, and they're not the point of the climb. That's why goals are temporary. They're meant to be used for a stretch of the trail and then be left behind. They're adjustable. If the terrain changes, your schedule shifts, your energy drops, or the route stops making sense, you don't force the goal, you adjust it. And they're replaceable. If something, God forbid, happens where I'm no longer able to be a therapist, then what is my new goal? What is the new path I want to move on, knowing that service is of importance to me? And if a goal no longer serves your values, you don't double down out of stubbornness. You choose a new signpost that better fits the path you're on. This matters again because when goals get treated like destinations or like moral judgments, they stop helping. They turn into verdicts. I'm doing well or I'm failing. I fix my life or I'm a failure. I'm fit or I'm, not worth being loved. But when goals are used correctly, they're informational. They help you ask and answer, is this route still taking me uphill? Again, for example, if connection, a goal might be something like reaching out to one person this week. That goal isn't proof that you're connected enough. It's just a signpost, a way of checking in whether your actions line up with what matters to you. So again, values give you direction, goals help you navigate. We talk a bit more about SMART goals at TheraHive, which we offer a free resource, which we'll sort of post at the end. But something to keep in mind, SMART goals are a great way to help organize these thoughts. Next slide, Chantal. Okay, intentions. So now I'm going to sort of hopefully bring in the big piece of today. This is intentions. This is like the missing piece. And this is usually for me where things begin to click. Intentions are what link values to behavior. They translate what matters into how you actually respond in real moments. Unlike goals, intentions don't change just because the plan changes. If a goal has to be adjusted or replaced, the intention can still hold. That's because intentions aren't about outcomes, they're about your stance. Intentions are especially important under emotional pressure. When anxiety, frustration, self-doubt, shame show up, intentions give you something to come back to. They help guide behavior when thinking clearly is hard, when emotion mind comes up. So intentions answer a very specific question, and this might be helpful for everyone to take note of. How will I walk toward this value, especially when I don't feel like it? If your value is growth, the intention might be, I will stay engaged when things feel uncomfortable. That intention can apply in a lot of different situations, a difficult conversation, starting something new, sticking with a task when the urge is to avoid. The goals might change, but the intention stays relevant. So values give you direction, goals help you navigate the path, intentions guide how you walk the trail, especially when the conditions get tough. Now, Alicia, over to you.
Okay. Yes. So now that you've kind of explained and mapped out our mountain metaphor and how values and goals line up, right? And we want to talk about our actual movement on that trail, though. So intention, remember that commitment to the direction in a way. The DBT skills, I want you to think about this as almost like the tools that you have in that backpack with you on this journey. What are you going to take with you that's going to allow you to stay on that path and keep your feet moving forward? Because, right, we know that there are going to be times when emotions come up, right? Difficulties come up, our motivation drops. And what is going to help you to stay aligned with your values, to act on purpose instead of being reactive, and to keep walking even when it's difficult? And those are when DBT skills come in. We're going to go into more detail about what specific skills can be helpful. There are so many DBT skills, and obviously we are not going to be talking about all of them. Many of them would be helpful in terms of mindfulness and distress tolerance and emotion regulation, but we'll give a little bit of a few of them that can help you on this journey. So one of the skills I want to go into detail on is the concept of building or accumulating positive experiences. So in DBT, there's a core skill of building a life worth living, which I think really is the accumulating positives in the long term. Now, we can do accumulating positives in two different ways. Short-term positives, which are more about the small, everyday, daily actions that give you nourishment and a sense of pleasantness in the moment. And then there are the long term, which are more about setting the values, like the bigger, like what's important to me, as Jesse went into details about, whether it's service, for example, that's your value. Um, and these are going to help you with your climb, right? These are the fuel for your climb. When we want to intentionally accumulate positives. So one way we can accumulate positives is that short term. And it literally could be stopping to smell the roses, stopping to smell the flowers on your journey, feeling the sun on your face, noticing the sights and the smells, right? So the key about accumulating positives in the short term is that we need to be mindful of them in order to experience them as pleasant, right? So I think we've all probably had the experience of doing a pleasant event, that something that should be pleasant, but then doing it mindlessly and then not actually experiencing it in a pleasant way, right? We can eat the ice cream mindfully or mindlessly. And so if we're going to choose to eat the ice cream, like, can we really enjoy it and take it in? So these small intentional acts, I want you to think about things that really nourish you. So, maybe not picking up your phone and just doom scrolling. That might not be very nourishing, right? Like choosing an action that gives you a sense of joy or pleasantness. Could that, again, it's those moments of enjoyment that we can think about, like adding money to our piggy bank that allows us to be more resilient as things get hard, right? They fill us up with some satisfaction, even if the destination's still far away, it's giving us the fuel to keep going. And they're intentionally motivating because they give us immediate reinforcement. So to understand the long-term track, I wanted to bring in a quote from the DBT founder herself, Marsha Linehan. It's hard to be happy without a life worth living. This is a fundamental tenet of DBT. Now, I want to even expand on this quote because she goes on to say that, of course, in reality, all lives are worth living, but we need to experience it ourselves as worth living, right? So how do you experience your life as worth living? Well, one of the ways we can do that is to find our value, to find our meaning, our purpose, right? That can add to our overall happiness. So I'm kind of going to go over this one a little bit more briefly because Jesse did such a great job with defining values and goals. But the skill of accumulating positives in the long term is all about this. It is all about identifying our values and then breaking that value into goals and then action steps. We have a great resource on our website, which is the values sort card. So if you're looking at this and being like, well, I don't know what my values are, or you may have many values, like I have many values, and it can be hard to kind of figure out or prioritize, well, what value am I going to be working on? Like, what value do I want to lean into? And so getting clarity on your values, maybe what's important to you. I think sometimes we can feel like, okay, I'm supposed to have this value. Maybe my parents expect me to have this value, or I have external pressure to hold this value, but really trying to use, and that's why I'm going back to that value sort card to identify like what's really important to me, what matters to me. And then once you have that value, you can translate it into goals. So going back to my health example, because that is one of my values, I have many goals under that value. Like one goal under that value is to eat healthy, which I mainly do, but sometimes I drift, and sometimes I fall off and then I come back, right, to eating healthy. Another goal I have under that value is to work out 3 times a week. But there's some weeks where I'm sick and I didn't hit that goal, right? But my intention is to still move my body, right? So these are ways in which breaking up our value into goals and then that action steps. Now, what I mean by action steps are even breaking it further. So if I want to work out 3 days a week, for me, in order for that to happen, I have to schedule it. Like I got to put it in my calendar. Like this is the time I'm doing it. And that's an action step, is actually scheduling it to make it more likely to happen. And this is how we build a life worth living step by step.
All right. So I want to talk about when things get a little tricky. And this is when the weather turns on our climb. So in this metaphor, if you can't already tell, the emotions are part of the climb. Anxiety, fear, shame. Those aren't signs that you're off course necessarily. They're just conditions that may show up as you move uphill. And in fact, oftentimes they will show up if you are moving towards something that's important to you. Otherwise, you wouldn't care. So when the weather shows up, something else tends to show up. Urges, urges to avoid, urges to quit, urges to turn back or wait until things feel better. I don't know about you all, but sometimes I get the thought, well, I'll just go to the gym if I feel better. And this is a lot of where a lot of change efforts fall apart, not because people don't know what matters, but because we start treating emotions like direction. So here's the reframe I want everyone to keep in mind. Emotions are weather, not direction. You don't stop climbing because it starts raining, and you don't wait for perfect conditions to live your life. The work isn't making the weather go away. The work is staying oriented, using your intentions to guide how you respond, and your skills to help you tolerate and move through the conditions that may show up. That's why we don't wait to feel confident or calm before we act necessarily. We keep walking in the direction that matters even when the weather is rough. You don't wait for good weather to live your life. Now, mindfulness. Mindfulness is the foundation of DBT. And very simply, mindfulness is noticing what happens in the present moment without judgment and on purpose. This definition matters because mindfulness isn't about relaxation or clearing your mind. It's about orientation. In the mountain metaphor, mindfulness is how you check your compass. On a climb, you don't stare at your compass the entire time. You probably will trip. Instead, you check it when you notice that things are getting confusing, when visibility drops, when you realize you've drifted off the path you intended to take. That's what mindfulness is doing. It's helping us notice where we are before we decide where to go next. I want to highlight the first step is simply to notice what's happening. In DBT, we notice that by using the observe and describe skills. What am I feeling right now? What urges are showing up? What just changed? And then we practice non-judgmentally. We name that experience without judgment. Not I'm failing or this shouldn't be happening, but oh, I'm noticing anxiety or I'm having urges to avoid. And then we practice effectively and we participate. Once we've named what's happening, we can ask ourselves, which way do I want to go from here? All right, next slide, please. Now, everyone's favorite distress tolerance. These are the skills that we use when there's a crisis. I want to keep in mind, and many of you all know this if you've taken a TheraHive course or done DBT, these are not skills to make you feel better, but they're to keep things from getting worse. If they make you feel better, fabulous. This is any moment where emotions spike, options narrow, and you have the urge to escape, avoid, or quit. And this is frequently when resolutions fall apart. When the weather automatically suddenly just turns on the climb, when it starts sleeting, raining, or the wind picks up, the urge is to turn back, not because the mountain is no longer matters, but because the conditions feel intolerable. And that's what's happening emotionally when frustration, rage, shame, anxiety show up. The nervous system reads discomfort as danger, and we are looking for relief. In those moments, abandoning the goal becomes an emotion regulation strategy. Quitting works temporarily because it reduces distress right away. Distress tolerance skills is the alternative to quitting. It's about staying aligned under pressure. It's about how you write out that urge, the urge to turn back, the urge to quit, without making a decision you'll regret later. And this is where intentions become very practical. An intention like, when I want to avoid, I will stay, isn't about pushing through or pretending it's easy. It's about choosing to remain on the trail long enough for the weather to pass. You're not waiting for the sky to clear. You're using skills to stay upright and oriented while it's raining. That's how difficulty stops turning into abandonment and starts becoming part of the climb. All right. Now, the last skill that we're going to touch on is cope ahead. And this is our game plan that we use in advance of the climb. So instead of waiting for the moment where you've already become depleted or frustrated, we cope ahead. And it's about practicing on purpose, planning how you want to respond when you know or anticipate the weather is going to turn. So I'll use a concrete example from my own life. One of my resolutions this year is to walk 10,000 steps a day. The first step is to name the situation non-judgmentally. And for me, reliably, what knocks me off course isn't the morning, it's the end of the day, around, I don't know, 7 or 8 p.m. And I'll check my step count and I realize I'm short. Now, when I'm framing this non-judgmentally, my judgment initially might be, oh, I messed up or I'm lazy. And instead, I'll use this as an opportunity to reframe. Late evenings are a vulnerable moment for me, non-judgmentally. Next, I anticipate the weather. In that moment, what usually shows up? Fatigue, irritation, disappointment. I'll notice the urge to say to myself, this doesn't matter, or I'll start fresh tomorrow. That urge to quit isn't random, it's predictable. Then I identify the value. What actually matters here? Why am I doing this? It's not perfection, it's health. It's following through on commitments I've made to myself. And that's the direction I want to stay oriented towards. From there, I set my intention. Not, I will hit 10,000 steps no matter what, but maybe something like, when I want to write the day off, I'll stay engaged instead of quitting. That intention doesn't promise success. It doesn't define my stance. It defines my stance, excuse me. Next, I choose a skill. What will help me stay aligned under pressure? Maybe it's the stress tolerance skills. Maybe it's mindfulness, noticing the urge to quit without immediately acting on it. Maybe it's opposite action and noticing when I have the urge to quit and, acting opposite to that urge. And finally, I rehearse and plan for drift. I imagine the realistic version of this moment where I sit down, scroll through my phone, and avoid walking for 10 minutes. And instead of treating that moment as a failure, I decide ahead of time, when I notice I've drifted, I'll name it and I'll still take a short walk. That's cope ahead. It doesn't guarantee I'll hit the number every day. It makes it much less likely that one hard moment turns into giving up entirely. So cope ahead helps you recognize the weather when it shows up and stay on the trail anyway.
Okay, so let's take a moment to zoom out again. And I really kind of like this concept of thinking about this all as a loop. Right, so we're calling this the DBT loop, and it's a continuous process of staying oriented toward your life worth living, right, toward your values and intention. So first, again, it's that identifying your values, the direction, right? This is your compass. This gives you the direction you're going. Then setting your goals, which are the signpost, right? These are the things that are going to let you know that you're making progress. Then you're choosing your intention. How are you walking? This is your behavioral stance as you make the climb, right? And then finally, we also want to think about the skills that Jesse just highlighted with the cope ahead. What tools are we going to use when that weather turned and the climb gets hard? So you might be thinking, okay, I have the tools, I got the map, I should be able to do this perfectly, But I want to make sure that everyone is clear. This is not going to be a straight climb, right? Things are going to come up and you are human. And so part of being human is that you're going to drift. You're going to lose your momentum, right? You might stray off the path and you might even feel discouraged at times, right? So we don't view drifting as a failure, right? We actually see this as a normal part of the process. And so coming back to this loop, we just re-identify our values, reconnect with those values, reconnect with the signpost, right? We're kind of going over and over again in this loop. So again, the climb is not a straight line. We need to constantly be reorienting toward the direction that matters. The path might be windy. It might double back, right? You might find yourself standing still or blocked at times. And success can sometimes actually be that moment you realize that you've drifted and you choose once again to bring yourself back to the direction that mattered. Checking that compass, setting your intention, and continuing on your path toward your life worth living goals and values. So that concludes our presentation. And I want to just highlight some resources that we have that we put together. We will be emailing you a worksheet that kind of goes through everything we've talked about, an intention setting worksheet. We also have a bunch of resources on our website, including the values sort card I mentioned before, the SMART goal exercise, a DBT pocket guide, which has a list of all the DBT skills, as well as the DBT diary card.
Okay. So this is the opportunity for some questions from folks. We would love to hear from any of you about anything that came up, any questions that you all have around, what this looks like in practicality and what potentially can get in the way for you.
And I think Chantal will be moderating that, right? By fielding questions in the chat.
I sure will. Thank you. Thank you
Great.
to Jesse and Alicia for leading this presentation. Really appreciate you deep diving into intention setting, different from resolution setting. Fabulous to see everybody join us here as well. Thank you for everyone who stuck it out for the full presentation. We really appreciate having you all here. If you have any questions specifically about the presentation, which I see some coming in now, go ahead and drop those in the chat and we will go ahead and filter those. And I will be asking some questions to you, Jesse and Alicia. So if you want to send a question, just hit that chat icon, type in your question, and we'll go through these as they come in. Also, just want to call out, we are close to the end of time for our session here. We might stick around for an extra 5 minutes just because we started a little bit late. And if we don't get to your question, still go ahead and send it. We may try to answer those later in our blog post, which we'll be sending out. So first question we have this question. What do you say to yourself when you notice yourself drifting?
Hmm.
I'll tell you what I try not to say to myself. And when I say try, it's an effort. I try not to beat the crap out of myself or tell myself I'm a failure, I'm lazy. One thing I hope folks take away is that shaming yourself towards change will only get you so far. And so I think the first thing I say to myself is I acknowledge that I've drifted non-judgmentally. And then I try to approach it with some compassion and validation. One thing I want to name is that we're living in really painful and challenging times. And so walking this path, walking any of our paths, I have enormous respect for anyone that is trying to do that work. And so it's inevitable that we're going to drift. And I think it's crucial that we offer ourselves the compassion when that happens, because life is hard. Alicia,
Yes.
what are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think self-validation and compassion are the two strategies I try to remember to do first. And then the other piece, I like asking myself the question, is this effective? when I'm noticing myself off track. So even just checking in with myself about the behavior I'm doing that maybe is not staying on the trail, to just kind of like check in, like, is this effective? Is this what I want to be doing right now? Is this moving, and not in a non-judgmental way? I find that particularly helpful when I'm, wanting to focus, because I sometimes get distracted when I need to focus in my value of being productive, particularly.
I I I think that I want to, whoever asked that question, I think it's pretty fabulous because it speaks to intention. And
Mhm.
I think there's actually an intention that we can set for ourselves here, right? When I notice I've drifted, I will be compassionate.
Mhm.
Like that's something that is a phrase that we can hold with ourselves.
Yeah.
I love that. That's amazing. Another question that we just received is how do you, this is kind of my interpretation of this question. How do you know when you have enough values, or conversely, how many values is too many values? And kind of how do you navigate figuring that out?
Mm. I don't think there is such a thing as too many or too little values. So I'll just start there. But I think if you do have a lot of values, it can be hard to know where to start, right? And I think we can't, it would be overwhelming to try to be working on goals for like 20 different values, I think. So I think it does require some prioritization in terms of what's important to me right now. Because values can also shift over our life. The values you had when you were younger may not be the values you have in middle age, right? And so our values can also change over time. And what we're prioritizing might change over time or be different in a given moment.
I will also say, I wish I had known about values, about life worth living when I was in my 20s. I never even knew that values, sort of thought about it as a concept. And so, what has been really helpful for me in becoming a psychologist was all of a sudden developing that awareness and then checking in with myself and my wise mind around what is important to me. Like actually spending time with myself thinking about this. And so whether that means you end up with lots of values or a few values, like I just think that practice of just being with yourself and thinking through what's important to you is critical.
Fabulous. I see a question that came in wondering if we have a worksheet on how to figure out our values. I think I can answer that one. We sure do. It's called the Values Card Sort. I will drop the link in the chat for anyone who's interested, and we'll also send it out via email. But maybe Alicia and Jesse, could you just talk folks through what does that actual exercise entail? What is a values card sort exercise?
Yeah, I think the origins of the value card sort originated in a type of treatment called motivational interviewing, where it was very much around like, like what is like when we're on this path and things get hard, what's going to keep me walking? And the values card sort is kind of this playful thing, and I've actually done it with friends. I find it to be like a really great connecting and social activity where you are picking amongst lots of values and you can write in your own, and then you're slowly weaning out the ones that are most important to you. Our card sort asks that you end up with five, but that's arbitrary. Alicia, anything that I missed there?
Oh, I think you did great. Yeah.
Okay.
Amazing. Okay, let me go back to some of these questions. What do you do in a situation where it feels like life is throwing so many obstacles at you, so many curveballs, and you can't even take a step forward. You're basically in this frozen moment. Where do intentions and goals and values come in there?
Mm. Yeah. I mean, I just want to first just give some validation to whoever asking that question, because I think we can feel sometimes we're just in just in survival mode, that just we're just trying to survive, and everything is just so overwhelming, and there's just so much we're dealing with. So even trying to think about goals and values can be so hard. Um, so I do think this is where again those DBT skills are so important. Because if we can use distress tolerance and mindfulness to get to a place where we feel a little bit more regulated and a little less overwhelmed, then it can open up space to start moving again toward goals and values. But when we're in that crisis state, or everything is coming at us, we may need to really be pulling the tools out of the toolbox and maybe getting more support too. We didn't talk about bringing another hiker with us, but sometimes we need a buddy on that trail. We can't be doing the trail alone all the time.
Very much in agreement. I will also say that for me, in some of my hardest moments, when it feels like the path is completely blocked and it's just raining and everything painful is hitting at once, knowing that like what my value or purpose is has been the thing that has kept me weathering the storm, right? Like that has been the thing that has made me sort of see beyond this immediate moment of pain. And so I think, Alicia, between the two of us, we're sort of highlighting this dialectical tension. One, really pausing and just sort of allowing yourself to get through that moment. And two, holding on to, okay, if even if this pain shows up, how do I want to be in the world?
Amazing. Well, thank you, Jesse and Alicia. We are at time this morning. I would just encourage anyone who has any other questions to reach out. Big round of applause to Jesse and Alicia. I know that some of you probably have a hard stop right now. I'm just going to take a couple minutes to close us out for anyone who is curious about TheraHive. So thank you. Big thank you to Jesse and Alicia.
Thank you, guys.
Appreciate both
I'm
of you.
loving all the hearts and clapping.
I
That's been
know.
nice. Thank you. Yes, and this was really enjoyable. So hopefully we'll be able to do some more of these in the future too.
That would be amazing.
Wonderful.
Okay.
Amazing. Thank you to you both. For anyone who's curious about TheraHive and the work that we do, in case you're new here, TheraHive is a virtual DBT skills group program. We're a psychoeducation program. We have a 22-week program for adolescents, for adults as well. We have an advanced group program and an 8-week parent program. You can find out more at TheraHive.com. You can also schedule a free information session with myself or any member of our enrollment team. We would be happy to help you navigate this decision matrix of finding the right level of support for your different needs, and maybe even helping you tie those to your intentions and your goals and your values. So again, TheraHive.com, and we will be sending out the recording for this session and some other free resources shortly. So check your inbox, and we look forward to seeing you guys all next time. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful week.